Alright, so the goal of this video is to discuss simple map design using the ArcGIS Pro software, followed by some cleanup using graphic editing software, and specifically we're going to look at Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so what I'm going to do as an example here is produce a simple geologic age map for the United Kingdom. And this is data from the United Kingdom Geological Survey. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is add in some data here. So I have a blank map. It's just loaded with a base map. So I'm going to add some data, and specifically I'm going to look inside of this database where I've made some copies of some of this geologic data. So what we're going to look at here specifically is this bedrock geology. So I'm going to add that in. Okay, so as you can see, this automatically moves us over to the geographic extent defined by the UK there, or the extent of the layer. And since we didn't have any layers drawn in other than the base map, it should have reprojected the map to match the input layer. So if we look under source here, and then spatial reference, we should see that this layer is in a specific projection for the UK. So British National Grid, it's a transverse Mercator projection, and there's its like EP SG, or European Petroleum Survey Group code. Okay, so I think that seems like a reasonable projection, so we're just going to leave it at that. Note that if you want to, you could go into the map here and change the coordinate system, and the data layer should be reprojected on the fly. All right, so first thing I'm going to do in this map production is I'm going to remove the base map. We don't really need that in the map layout. We're just going to get rid of it. Also note, if you leave the Esri base maps on when you are creating a map layout, it's going to watermark your map with some copyright information. So I generally just don't include them unless there's a good reason to. Note you could create your own base maps if you want, but again, in this case we really don't need one. Alright, so there's our layer. First thing we're going to do is work on symbolizing it. So by default, everything comes in as just a single symbol. So what I'm going to do next is change the symbology. So that I just opened up this symbology pane. I'm going to move this over, it's a little big. And again, the default there is single symbol. What we want to do is display the data based on the geologic age. So that would be kind of ordinal data, so we're going to go for unique values. All right, and by default it just grabs a field there, but we actually need to pick one, the correct field for what we're trying to accomplish. So what I'm going to look at here is the max geologic period. Okay. So there's a couple things that you'd probably want to edit. So first off, everything's in uppercase, so you'd probably want to go through and edit the labels so that they're just a little bit more, map friendly. So for example, we could change this to lowercase there. Also, since this is geologic ages, it would make sense to have the features listed not in like alphabetical order, but in like chronological order. So like the youngest at the bottom to like the most recent at the top. We'd also probably want to get rid of any null values or extra values. Note that by default there's going to be this all other values option added in. If you don't want that included, if you go here to more, you can turn that off as the first option there. And notice there it dropped out of the legend. All right, so let's talk a little bit about changing colors. So since this is unique symbol and it's not like a stretch or something where you're going to have a series of colors like for continuous data, it would make sense to edit these separately. Note that this can get complicated as when you have a lot of categories. It's hard, you got to find ways to differentiate the units with colors, but without running out of options. For something like this, probably what would make most sense is to make sure that the colors of adjacent features or adjacent units are different, so that the boundaries are very clear. Okay, so to change the color of a unit or a symbol, if you right click, you can go here to color properties, and this opens up this color properties menu. If you double click, then you can go into properties here and then select from a list there, and then again color properties will bring up the same menu. So there are some like default colors in Arc that you can pick, but you can pretty much use any color you want, and you can define that using different color space. So here we have like RGB values on an 8-bit, so 0 to 255. Then we have our hue saturation value, grayscale for just black and white, CMYK for like print. What we're going to stick with is RGB, and I wanted to show you how to use hex codes. So hex codes are unique identifiers for colors. Basically, it's a 6-character string that's used to represent 8-bit color value. All right, so here's a good website you're probably familiar with if you're a GIS professional. So this is useful for picking color ramps and color ramps that meet certain criteria such as photocopy safe. There's a couple different groupings here. There's sequential for something like continuous data, diverging ramps for something like, increasing in one direction, decreasing in the other, so things like population increase, population decrease, and then qualitative ramps, which would be for unordered data. And note that you can also change out the number of categories. It goes up to 12 here, and you can get back values. So you get back RGB values, CMYK, again for print, and then also the hex codes. If you just want to look up hex codes, there's lots of options on the web. Here's just an example. This is htmlcolorcodes.com. So you can pick kind of like a base hue and then change the brightness and saturation there, and then that'll spit back the associated hex code. So it's pretty easy to get these. So once you have a code, I'm just going to use one of these. To apply it, I'm just going to move this over. To apply it, you just simply dump it in there. Now, you don't have to dump in the hash because it's already out front. You don't need to actually put that in. All right, and then OK. And apply. So now we've applied that like blue looking color. Okay, so obviously it'd be pretty tedious to go through all of these. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to use a layer file. So one way to save your symbology for a layer, or to use someone else's symbology, or to apply symbology to different data sets, is to save it as a layer file. So if we really like this setup, which obviously is not complete, but if we wanted to save it, we could click on right click and then go to share and then save as layer file. And what a layer file is effectively just the saving the symbology. It's not a copy of the actual like geospatial data. All right, so I have a layer file that I want to use that has already been created. So to apply one, I'm going to go to Symbology, and then up here in this little hamburger menu, we can do Import Symbology, and we need to find the layer. Note that you can also reference other layers that are drawn in if you want to match. So here's this Symbology I saved out to my desktop, and we hit OK. And then it's going to have to find the fields to match, and since these had the same field names, that was pretty easy. And then we'll hit Run, and it should spit that back. Okay, so now I've basically changed all the symbology with that layer. Now if I wanted to maintain this for later use, I could again save it as a layer file. So sharing, save as layer file. Okay, so that's good. I think the next step is I like to put like a little bit of texture underneath of these layers, and the way I'm going to do that is by using a hill shade. So I'm going to try to find hill shade layer here, which I have in one of my other maps. Let's see where this is saved to. Oh, my Scratch. Okay. So I have this Scratch workspace for just saving temporary files here on my secondary drive. And what I'm looking for is this UK hillshade. Okay. I got a bit of a weird data gap there. It's fine. It's just for demonstration, but there's something going on with that layer. Okay, so there's a simple hillshade. It's pretty coarse, but gives us a bit of a texture. And I just realized I put that in the wrong map. So let me go back to the right map here. And again, I'll grab that layer. UK hillshade. All right. Okay, so to actually see that texture underneath of the layers, we're going to have to add a bit of a transparency. So to do that, we just click on the bedrock layer here, go to appearance, and then we can adjust this. Again, I think this should be fairly subtle. I don't think we need to make it very transparent, just enough to get some texture underneath of it. I don't want it to look like too washed out. I think that's okay. Another option is you could do the other way. So you could put the hillshade on top, and then you could adjust the hillshade's transparency. We're just going to stick with transparency on the vector data. Okay, so I think that's reasonable. That's all the layers I'm going to put on there. I'd like to make another map that would be like a reference map that we could put on the page. So I already did that. Here's an example of that. So this is just a simple reference map of the UK showing major roads, major cities, yeah, and then the different countries that make up the UK. So just for some changes, I don't want to add the labels in this case, so I'm just going to turn those off. I think these points are a little big, so you go in here, make them a little smaller. I think that's all right. Other than that, I think it's fine. So I think that would make a nice, simple, like reference map. So we have two maps. Now the next step is to actually, combine them into a layout. So to create a layout, I'm going to go to Insert, New Layout, and that creates that'll allow you to set a paper size. There's a bunch of different standard sizes here. Note that it doesn't matter a lot because you can always change it after the fact. So I'm just going to grab, it's kind of tall, so you probably want to have something tall as opposed to landscape. Let's just use this like A4 size. Okay, so here we have a paper size again, or a sheet of paper. So if we want to actually change the dimensions, to do that, you click on the layout there, properties, and then you can change the size of the paper and even like the units of measurement and stuff if you want. Okay, and then, but we'll just leave it. I think that's fine. All right, so now we need to start adding elements to our map. So we're going to start off with the actual maps. So the first thing I want to add is this new geologic map, and I'm going to have that fill a good chunk of the page since that's the main map. Okay, so once you add a map, you kind of have a weird issue, and then now you have like two different spaces that you can move around in. You can move around in the map space, or you could move around in the paper layout space. So how you deal with that in Arc is if you want to move them within the map space, you can right-click inside the element and activate it, and that allows you to zoom in and out and pan the map. Oop. Okay. Okay. So again, you can just kind of move that around. I'm going to turn this off. All right. Let's see. What do we want to do to potentially improve this? I think that's, yeah, I think we may need to change the size once we start putting some other elements on. We'll see. We'll see. So we'll start off by putting the other map on and go from there. So to put our reference map on, I'm going to grab that reference map that I generated, and this is going to be a little smaller because again, it's basically just there, just for like the more political boundary reference. Okay, so next step is I'm going to remove these borders because I don't think they're really necessary. So open up the properties for that object, and under one of these, there we go, we can change the border. By default, got a 1-point border, but we can turn that off. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, turn off the border. All right, let's activate this now, make it a bit bigger, and turn that off. Okay, I think that's all right. Let's move this over. Okay, and then let's start adding in some other elements. All right, so first thing I'm going to add is the legends. So to add a legend, you have to be clicked on the map that you want to add the legend for. So let's start with our main map here. So I'm click on that, and then we click legend, and we can draw a box for where the legend will populate. So by default here, there's going to be some issues with the legend. We got some file names in there, like the field name, the file name. We've got the hill shade underneath, which I think isn't really necessary to have in the legend. So if we go over here now, in comparison to like a map, what we have now is a list of contents for the layout as opposed to the map. So you can see these different map elements. So for legend here, do a drop down, we can see there's two objects in there. We have the hill shade and the bedrock geology. So what we're going to do is turn this one off, and there it disappears. And then to get rid of these, the layer and field name there, if we click on that object in this format legend item menu, we can turn off the layer name and the heading. If it was in a group, you could also turn off the group name. If you turn off the labels, then you just get the symbols. This isn't very useful. Okay, all right, so there we have a very basic legend. So to format it, if you're clicked on it, you can go to this format menu and you can start manipulating it. So for example, you can change the fonts, font size, position, so on and so forth. I'm going to bump up the font a bit. That's too big. Maybe 18. I think like this is the key kind of information on the map, so I feel like that should be pretty big. Maybe we'll bump it down slightly. How about 16? Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty good. So there's a quick legend that shows our color coding. Note that the default is to have the rectangular box as the symbol, but you can change that. So for example, if we go back to our map, we click on these objects, go here into Symbology. If you click on this drop down, you can change it to something else. So I'm just going to change them to this circular rounded object, just since these aren't really like naturally rectangular features. I think that kind of makes sense. So anyway, I'm just switching all those out. And then if we go back to our map layout, we should see that those automatically updated because they're still dynamic and they're still linked. All right, let's fiddle around with this a little bit more before we move on. So let's look at, let's see, to our legend. There we go. So under legend items here, if we show properties, we could actually make these a bit bigger if we wanted. So I'm going to try to make them roughly maybe a little smaller than that. There we go. So that increased the size of them a bit. I think that's a little easier to see. And then for this second map, I want to add like a little legend that just highlights the colors assigned to the different countries. So I'm going to dump that in. And again, over here in legend, we'll get rid of the cities, urban areas, and we'll just leave the countries in there. We'll turn the heading off and the layer name off. And then we'll go in here and maybe bump up the size slightly. And we need to find a good place for this. Nothing's jumping out. I think, well, that's going to probably not be great because it'll interfere with our legend. I'm going to put it there. And then we'll just move this down a bit. I think that's okay. And then we'll kind of stack them. Okay, so next thing we need to do is add in some orientation scale objects. So we're going to add in a north arrow. Again, it'll be based on the thing you're clicked on, which for these is the same projection, so it really shouldn't matter, but we'll click on our main map there. So I'm going to add in a north arrow there. Again, these don't need to be very big. They're just ancillary information. And then I'm going to add in a scale bar. For this specific map, I would argue that a simple scale bar is good because you're not really making measurements with it. You just want to get a sense of the scale, right? So I just drew that out there. It's weird, 160 miles, so we're going to play around with improving that a bit. So I'm going to go in here first, and I'm going to fill in the legend a bit. I'm going to change the outline color to maybe make it, I don't know, be a good color. How about maybe just make it a little lighter. And then go in here to design, and we're going to change the units to kilometers, and we'll abbreviate, and we'll have it put the units not after the bar but below it. So we'll just do let's see, below. So we want to do below after. There we go, below center. That puts it underneath. Now we got this bar that's 310 kilometers, which is kind of weird. Sorry, this is in the way there. Let me do a refresh. And there we go. So let me click on it. Let me just do a save real quick. Sometimes you'll have this issue where a feature just doesn't want to. Okay, there's our scale bar. Okay, I see what's going on. Okay, there we go. So now I'm gonna play with the length a bit to try to get it rounded off, maybe like 300 or so. There we go. I think that's reasonable. We'll pull this back down to where we had it. All right, so we have a very simple scale bar. Pretty simple north arrow. And let's add a title. So we do insert here. And we want to do, let's see, where's our, there, so we want to do text. I'm going to draw a text box here, and we'll say UK Bedrock Geology. And as you can see, that's really big, so we're going to need to make that smaller. Maybe something like 28. No, it's a little bigger. How about 36? That seems good. Oops. Okay, there we go. And then we'll move that up a little. And what else do we want to do? We definitely want to cite the data source. So we're going to go in here and put in another little text box at the bottom. And we'll say data from UK Geological Survey. I'm not 100% sure if that's how they abbreviate it, but we'll just assume that it is. And that doesn't need to be as big, so we're going to make that pretty small, maybe like 16. I'll bump that down here into the corner. Okay, I think that's pretty good. It's, again, pretty simple layout. There's not a whole lot going on, but I think it, gets the job done. All right, so let's say that we're happy with this, and we'd like to, export it, do some additional work with it. So first thing I'm going to do here is just save again, make sure I don't lose anything. And a couple notes before we get out of here. If you want to make sure you don't manipulate any features in the map or the layout, you can lock them. So that makes it so that they can't be altered. And yeah, I think, it's probably good enough. Okay, so we got ourselves a simple layout. And if we want to actually now export it out, we can go to Share and then Layout. Now, there's a couple different options here. If you want to save a map to like a raster file and you're not going to do a lot of editing with it, then you can save it to a compressed format like PNG or JPEG. PNGs are nice because they support transparencies where JPEGs don't, or a TIFF, which is generally can be uncompressed. There's also options for like vector graphics like EPS and SVG. Note there's no longer like AI support, but there's these AIX files which allow you to import into Illustrator. I've had trouble with that, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. I'm just going to export it out to a PDF. This isn't really an optimal way to get it into a graphics editor, but it's good enough. So we're just going to do that for now, but the AIX is generally better. It just hasn't been working well for me. Okay, so I'm going to change the name of this. We'll call it UK Geology. Okay, oops. All right, that's good. So let's do an export. And again, it's just processing, so it's done there. And we'll drop that down, and that should be somewhere on my messy desktop here. So we're looking for PDF file, UK map. That's not it. There it is, UK Geology. So we'll do open with now. I'm going to open it with Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Adobe Illustrator, it's basically a vector graphics editing software, which means that it works with vector graphics. So instead of storing things as rasters with pixels, you're storing your data using vector objects, point lines, polygons, text, so on and so forth. So one thing that's really powerful about working in an environment like this for your graphics editing is that you have access to like the raw vector data. So for example, you can fiddle around with fonts and colors and shapes and things to improve your map. All right, so let's play around with this a bit and just see how we can make some simple manipulations. All right, so first off, let's say I wanted to change the title here. So here's UK Bedrock Geology. Let's say I wanted it to be like United Kingdom Bedrock Geology. So to do that, I'm just going to grab the text tool over here, click inside the text, select the whole thing, and there we can move it around. What I want to do is just edit it, so I'm going to type in here, so United Kingdom, and then we'll put in a return, Bedrock Geology. And we'll move that up slightly so it doesn't interfere with the map there. Okay, so that's just a simple edit of a single text object. So let's say now that you wanted to actually change something about all the text at once. So to do that, we could do a select all, and that selects all the elements on the page. And then if we go to type, we can do font, and we can change the font. So again, there's a bunch of fonts in here. This font I had to use recently for a paper. So let's say we had to use that font. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying it's for some reason required, like for a specific journal or publication or something. So if I change to that, it changes all the font on the page to that same new font. All right, you could also do the same thing with font sizes and whatnot. Okay, so how would you go about accessing like individual objects? Like let's say you wanted to manipulate one of these or move some stuff around. So one thing that can be kind of annoying when you bring data into Illustrator is that you may end up with some weird overlap. So for example, if I try to click on this, see how it didn't actually grab that object to basically grab the whole page? That's because there's basically overlapping layers. So if I go into the layers list, and if you don't have that up, you can go to view or window and then make sure layers is turned on. You can see that this thing is just a stack of different layers. And you can see there's lots of different components in here that can be worked with and edited. So for example, here's the scale bar. So if we turn that off, then it's no longer being displayed. All right, so if you can't seem to click on something, one option is to find it in here. So let's say I wanted to move Wales around, or the Wales name and symbol. So I'm grabbing the symbol there, and sorry, I got the wrong key. There we go. So there's all those components. So let's say that I decided I really don't like this here. I'd like to put it up here in the corner or something. So I'm going to move that up, and I could do the same thing here with like Scotland. I'm just going to do the rest of them all at once. So I'm going to grab all the Scotland and Northern Ireland and England parts. And then I'm going to move those up to here. All right. As you can see, those didn't line up perfectly. So let me try that again. Generally, there's good options for snapping. Sometimes you have to turn stuff on to make sure things line up well. Let me move the page here. Those actually look fairly lined up. I'm going to turn on, I guess Smart Guides is on. That should work. Let me see. Maybe I was just zoomed out too far. Oops. Let's find all of our whales stuff there. And just if we want to make sure it lines up. Yeah, I think it's pretty close. Okay, so we do have a couple issues here. Man, I could not. So for example, the last part of Northern Ireland's name was cut off there. I'm gonna make the paper a bit bigger so we can work with some more space, and then we'll move it back when we're done. Note here, this edge is a clipping extent, so that's kind of an issue there. All right, so what I'm going to do is split this name so that it's wraps, and then I'm going to take these other elements that are beneath it, Scotland and Wales, and move them down so they're not overlapping. Again, those aren't perfectly lined up, but I think that's fine for demonstration purposes. We put in a return there so they're aligned, or backspace. I'm just going to try real quick to see if I can get those lined up better. I'm not really sure why the grids aren't. Let me see here. Probably have something turned off. Generally you have, it'll snap when things are aligned well. Okay, and I'm just pulled the paper size back a bit. Okay, so now I move that up just so it's kind of out of the way. That would mean that all of this stuff could maybe be moved a bit. And so let's do that. There's going to be a lot of these, so let's see if we can find where all of them are at in the list here. And again, there's all these like subcomponents, so sometimes it's hard to find where things are exactly. That's one set there. So it looks like may have to let's real quick see if we can get away with just selecting all of these. Now see, grab the whole thing. So it looks like we need to start here and go all the way down to here. So I'm just trying to grab all of the elements here that make up this, the legend. And one down here for the Neogene. I think that's everything. So now if we grab those, maybe can move them up a little. We put them here. So we just moved all those elements. What else would we want to do to this map? Let's see. Let's just trying to think of some other common things you might want to do to a layout. Let's say we just wanted to put like a box behind this just so it stood out a bit. So here I'm just going to draw in a rectangle. And see what happened was it's above it, because it's the things that you draw last are going to draw above the things that were there before. So I'm going to go here to the layer list. I'm just going to pull it down to underneath. And it looks like there's a clipping path under there. I might have to put it up. See here, higher. Nope. I think that's because it's behind the actual page. So we might have to find a place to put it inside of here, actually. So let's put it underneath of here, maybe? No, that's underneath of that object. Let me undo that. Let me see. That's above the text. Oh no, that actually will work. Yes, I just need to change the color. Okay, so we have an object. We just put it in the right order so it's drawn where we want it. And now we want to take that object and change its color. So I'm just gonna pick maybe like just like kind of a subtle like mid-gray type color. That's probably, let's make it a little darker. And again, if you had a hex code, you could just dump it in there. Okay. Oh, all right. And then let's put a little border on it. Go back and click on that layer so we have it. Oh yeah, there's our rectangle there. Click on that again, go to properties. We're going to add a stroke or like a line around it. And again, I'm just picking something randomly there. And you can again change the thickness and whatnot. So we made our legend stand out a bit there. We got some space in here. So for example, if you wanted to add in like a text box, we could do that. It's going to fill it with some blank text. So we could say just something descriptive like this is a geologic map showing the ages of bedrock units for the entirety of the United Kingdom. And we could do, let's see here, maybe bump up, we can play with the font a bit. Let's grab this again. We'll just bump up the font size a little. And then again, it's an object, so we could then move it around, place it where we want. All right, I think that's fine. I mean, again, there's lots you could do with this, but I think I'm just trying to show you some common things like changing text, moving stuff around. All right, so let's say we're happy with this. So next thing I'm going to do is just save it. So I'm going to do a save as, and remember we exported it as a PDF, which is not optimal. So we're just going to convert it to an AI file, which is Adobe Illustrator file, and then you can still go back in here and edit, move stuff around and whatnot. Okay, and then once that's done, we could do an export. So I'm just going to do an export here, export as, and we'll just save it as a TIFF. We'll use the artboard, so it's just the artboard area, and we'll save that here on my desktop. This is kind of a large print, so I think that's why it's being slow. Okay. All right, I think that's good. So let's find that object now. There we go. So I'm opening it up. And there's our final map layout with our two maps and our legends and our ancillary elements and text that's been edited in Illustrator. And again, if you decided you need to go back in here and do some manipulation, then you can open it back up in Illustrator and play with it. Or if you want to do some major changes to layout, you might have to go back to ArcMap or ArcPro, do your editing, export, and then do additional editing in Adobe Illustrator.